Halloween is past, November is upon us. That means it's time to stop and rank every October new release that I saw, and there was 13 of them, from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your take on all of the new releases that you saw from the month of October. Because I was at a film festival back in September, I actually saw a bunch of October movies early, but I wasn't able to review all of them. So stuff like The Lighthouse, Parasite, I saw those a while back. I'll give you some of my deeper thoughts on them here, but there was just a bunch of different stuff that I managed to see this month. So we should have lots of nice, interesting discussions down below in the comment section. One final thing before we get started on this one. If you want kind of my day-to-day stuff and what's going on with my channel, the best place to get updates on me or send me messages and expect to get a response is over on Instagram. The link is down below in the description, but I do read all of my direct messages. I reply to almost all of them. With that said, let's get started. Coming in last place is Addam's Family. Maybe I saw this in the wrong mood. Maybe I went in with the wrong mindset, but I just did not enjoy my experience seeing this film. I went to go see it with my buddy Tyler while I was in LA. I actually went to go see a movie every single day that I was in LA with him. And it was one of those movies that kind of started right off the bat when it was kind of setting up the tone and the ideas inside of it, the Addams families being these rejects on the run, that people don't accept them. I was pretty nervous about what they were setting up for the arc for the rest of the thing. And then as it went into the specifics of where it went with the storyline, I didn't find it funny enough, or at least not consistently funny enough. And the specific plotline tried to both be like, let's do shocking humor with what we're doing and how wacky they are, while also being really sweet in other ways. And the mix, I didn't think went together particularly well, and making statements about not judging people by their exterior, and both the Addams family shouldn't do that, and then the city shouldn't do that. Like, I just don't think it paid off. It was a story that's been told many times before. I'm not even sure which studio did it, but it reminded me a bunch of those Dr. Seuss movies they've made over the last 10 years, just not really as good as those ones. And I don't know that a bunch of those have been particularly good even in the animation. So for whatever reason, this one just didn't work for me. So it comes in last place. Coming in at number 12 is going to be Fractured. This is a Netflix original film. Another one that I saw at Fantastic Fest. I talked about it in my discussion of the Fantastic Fest movies that I put out after Fantastic Fest. But Sam Worthington, kind of thriller, memory loss type film where you don't know exactly what's going on. How reliable is the narrator? Who can you trust? Who's out to get the family? Where have the people gone? One of those types of stories that was working well enough for me for the first half of the film, and then as you start to piece together exactly what's going on, where it's going, and they start to giving you the answers, I did not like the path that it kind of ended on with the film. So for me, it was one of those ones that, with the nature of films like this, where it's kind of, what's going on? What happened to him? Why are they doing this? It all depends, like the big reveal at the end, the answer that they give kind of ties it all together, or it all falls apart. And for me, this was one where it fell apart, where it was like, oh, well, that just kind of left me on a sour note. I wish you hadn't done that. Next up on our list is going to be Maleficent 2, Mistress of Evil. Another one that I watched while I was in LA with my buddy Tyler, and one that I really enjoyed a lot of the ideas that they had inside of the film, with the different kingdoms, marriage, doing Game of Thrones for kids. But with the runtime that they had, it was under 2 hours, and that it was only PG, you just can't do Game of Thrones for kids with that. You can't have this many characters, this many kingdoms, and a third act with a very high body count with a PG rating, because it just shrugs it off. Like all this, there's a bunch of death that happens, and it's like, whatever. Likewise, Angelina Jolie is great as Maleficent, but she disappears for big chunks of the movie because they've got all these characters and other things kind of happening. So like half-ish way, 55% of the way through the movie, she disappears until the final 20 minutes or something, like the final 15 minutes. Right as like everything's coming to a head, she's just off somewhere else. So it's a movie that I think maybe another pass on the script, maybe them like deciding with the story we want to tell, we got to go PG-13, or I think they might have just needed a different concept for it, but with under 2 hours, PG ratings, and Maleficent down the street, I think they just shackled themselves, and they couldn't make a good movie with what they went with. Bringing us into the top 10 is Jexi, and yet another movie that I saw with Tyler in California. I also saw this one with my buddy Durbin of Durbania, another YouTuber on here. But yeah, we just decided on a whim to go to the movies. Jexi was playing, so that's the one that we picked. And if you don't know what Jexi is, because apparently not a lot of people want to go see it, it's a rom-com of sorts about this guy that's kind of a loser, and then his phone is there trying to help him, and his phone is like really mean to him to try and get him to stop being so much of a loser and go out more in public. So it's kind of these high-concept comedies, a bit of rom-com inside of about a phone that becomes his friend and his mentor. But when it's that, I actually enjoyed it. When it's just the phone is trying to help him out and get him to go out and do things, and so he starts kind of dating a girl. When it was that, it was a little bit on the bland side, a little bit formulaic, but I enjoyed it for what it was. But then you get about 65% of the way through the story, and there's a big twist that kind of happens with it, and it can't decide if it wants to be rom-com movie or jealous ex-girlfriend movie, crazy ex-girlfriend movie, and the phone is his crazy ex-girlfriend, and it just goes so over the top that it kind of spoiled it a little bit for me. It's a movie that I'd heard almost all bad things about it before I went into it, and then after I came out of it. And for that first half, I was really like, yeah, I think this is a lot better than people are giving it credit for. Addam Divine's pretty fun in this one. And then, yeah, the third act kind of kills this one, unfortunately. At number 9 is Black and Blue. This is a cop thriller with familiar territory in regards to a cop finds herself on the run from both other police officers and the community that she's set in, but it goes hyper relevant with the specific premise of the film by making it about tensions inside of a black community between police officers, Blue, and the black community there. And also, likewise, she has a body cam on her. So a lot of very relevant things to kind of the current political climate that I think kind of gives it a little bit more edge than it probably otherwise would have with the basic cop on the run premise to it. It's actually pretty efficient at making you feel the tension of someone that doesn't have anywhere that they can run to. It doesn't, like, you feel that you're on the run. It doesn't really let up until the credits roll. As soon as things go into action, you feel it. And it even sort of reminded me of several plot lines in the TV show 24, which is a show that I love. So I enjoyed that aspect of it, the tension, the thrills. To make that happen, you have to suspend a little bit too much disbelief inside of it, because you're also like, why doesn't she just grab a phone? Why doesn't she go to Facebook? Why doesn't she just call the newspaper? Why does she call it? There's all these things that you're thinking she probably should do that she doesn't. You have to be able to suspend all that disbelief. If you can do that, it's not too bad. It's like a Redbox movie. You get it from Redbox. You watch it on Netflix, something like that. You'll probably have a good enough time with it. But if you watch the trailer and you thought, oh, that looks really bad, the movie itself is not going to win you over if you didn't like the trailer for it. Number 8 is Gemini Man. I went into this movie having heard from a bunch of people that it's like the worst script of the year. They hated it, as generic of a movie as you can get. So maybe I'd gone in with enough people kind of like hearing negative enough buzz about it that it just wasn't that for me, so I had a good time with it. But yeah, it just feels like one of these movies that just feels like an easy target because it is. It feels so much like a relic of the late 90s, both in starring the biggest star of 1999, Will Smith, and then an action movie premise that feels very much in the vein of Face Off and other films kind of like that. That's just kind of like this kind of absurd kind of premise, over-the-top action. Feels like all these movies that I kind of loved. And I think some people are just treating it like an easy punching bag because of that. For me, I just love this genre. I love watching Will Smith in an action movie. And because of that, there's plenty of stuff here that was enjoyable for me. Granted, people are right. It does just feel like a 90s action movie that, they lost the script and they found it and went, hey, let's run with this one. Oh, what does the note say? Will Smith battles himself. Yeah, let's do that. I mean, all of it feels 15, 20 years late. But I love that stuff from that era. So I'm the target audience for it, and I had a good enough time with it. It's not amazing cinema. It's not going to blow your mind. But if you actually enjoy, not ironically enjoy, but actually enjoy late 90s action movies, early 00s action movies, this is more of that genre that you enjoy. And there's the action's handled pretty nicely inside of it. Most 90% of the visual effects stuff that they do with Will Smith and de-aging looks really good. The final 10% looks really bad, but I'm honestly pretty confused as to why so many people hated it so much, because it delivers the fun at least. Number 7 is El Camino, the Breaking Bad follow-up movie. For me, this was a film that was really tough to evaluate because it, in certain senses, felt very much like a continuation of the show. It felt like we got a couple more episodes tacked on at the end to give Jesse Pinkman an epilogue. And that's kind of the problem, that it feels like a couple episodes tacked on, but it's technically a movie, and a movie that came out 6 years later. In which case, when you say you're going to make a movie about Breaking Bad 6 years later, I don't want Breaking Bad the Lost episodes. I don't want just a little epilogue that answers a couple questions and, kicks the ball down the field 20 yards, but doesn't really take me somewhere different. And so it's not that it was bad. I enjoyed it. I thought the acting was still well done. It felt in line. It didn't embarrass the show. It did a bunch of things really well. And if it had come out 5 years ago, if it had come out a year after the show ended, it's like, hey, we got a little epilogue that we're working on. The finale was very Walter White centric, and so we want to do this epilogue thing that is Jesse Pinkman centric. I probably would have responded better to it because it would have been a little bit closer and just felt like, oh yeah, that's a nice way to do that. Walter was the star of the show, but Jesse was right there with him, and so now let's give him one that kind of closes his story arc out a little bit better. That would have been cool. 6 years later doing that, it just felt too late. And also, like, some of the people clearly had aged quite a bit. Like, some of them had gained up some weight, so it didn't match up very well with the season of what they look like and things like that. And that's kind of distracting when you do that. I wish this would have come out 5 years ago, or I wish that they would have gone, let's really do something bold. What is Jesse up to 5 years later? As is, a little bit disappointed with what they went with. At number 6 is The Lighthouse. This is another one that I saw at Fantastic Fest over a month ago. And I talked about it once again in my video talking about the movies I saw at Fantastic Fest. And I didn't have anyone to talk to at the time about it. So I just had like my feelings of having watched it and watched a lot of movies that week. But since it started to appear in theaters, I've had more conversations about it to kind of figure out how to articulate how do I feel about this one. So The Lighthouse, it's a black and white film about two guys at a lighthouse, and they kind of get stranded there, and there's a lot of power dynamics between the two of them. It's Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, and it's like kind of a dark comedy, and it's experimental, and it's very artistic. And those aren't things that I'm normally the most into. It's not normally my type of film, but I can respect it. I can watch it and be like, this is an interesting experience, but it's not the type of movie I'd want to watch again. Like, I had my buddy Andy was like, hey, do you want to go see The Lighthouse? I was like, that's not the movie I want to rewatch. And that's the tricky thing with films like this for me, that I'm not wired this way. I heard some other people discuss it, that it's almost it's a film that's very much in the vein of The Shining in its own way, in that it's kind of experimental, trippy, weird. You don't know exactly all of what's real and what you're seeing. There's an element to it of someone being stranded and kind of going crazy. So that was kind of fun inside of it. I wasn't expecting it to be as funny as it was, and it can be, some of the scenes get very funny and very memorable in the way that they're done. So it's a movie that I would say that I respected more than I necessarily fully enjoyed. And that tends to be the case with films like this. I like more straightforward, direct, plot-driven ones than necessarily kind of more experimental ones where you don't know exactly what's happening. And I've said that about The Shining as well. People ask me all the time, don't you love The Shining? I don't love The Shining. I respect The Shining a great deal. And I'm going to rewatch it in a couple of days, actually maybe tonight, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a movie that I personally am in love with. But we're talking about The Lighthouse right now, a film that it's tough for me to talk about because it just feels outside of my specific bag of tricks. In 5th place is Jojo Rabbit, another one that I saw at Fantastic Fest. I actually got to work the red carpet on it, shake hands with Taika Waititi and Stephen Merchant. So pretty cool experience when I saw it. I do have a review up for it, so that one can kind of go into more detail onto my thoughts on it. In general, I thought it was really funny, and it worked better as a comedy than when it went into the drama. Not that the drama's bad, but because they went PG-13 so that a broader audience could see it and a younger audience could see it, I think that sacrificed a little bit of the punch to it. There were things that I don't think were handled as strongly as they needed to be, or weren't as brutal, as harsh as they probably should have been, given that we were talking about World War II and it involved children. But when it was funny, who knew that you could make Hitler this funny inside of a film? But I don't want to, I gave it a B+. I was very positive on the film, but there were certain things about it that kind of held it back from me fully loving it the way some people did, where a lot of people declaring it the best movie of the year. I didn't experience that when I saw it, but I very much did enjoy the film. Number 4 is Zombieland 2 Double Tap, another one that I saw in California. This one with Tyler at a press screening, which was a pretty cool experience. I saw it it wasn't in the Cinema Dome, but it's at the theater attached to the Cinema Dome, the ArcLight in Hollywood. You saw the Cinema Dome in the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood if you saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So very cool to actually be in that environment to see a movie, and actually snuck Tyler into the press screening. I wasn't supposed to get to bring a guest, but because he was standing next to me when I walked up, they're like, "Here, do you want a band?" And they gave him one. He was like, "Oh, sure." And he ended up going to the movies with me. I thought it was just a lot of fun. Not as fresh as the original one, but still just a very enjoyable film that delivered the fun, the laughs, didn't hurt the franchise, didn't embarrass itself or anything like that. It just didn't really feel like it skipped a beat. And I think some of that's because the original Zombieland was probably a little bit ahead of its time. They did that movie, people seemed to really like it, and then the writers got hired to do Deadpool, which took 6 years to actually make it to the big screen. So then Deadpool comes out, and it very much has the same meta humor commentary on what's happening that was in Zombieland. And Deadpool then popularized it. We had Deadpool 2, and then the next year we get Zombieland 2. And so it feels very fresh, modern, in line with some big, gigantic hits from the last few years, because it's the same writers, but they really were doing this stuff 10 years ago with the first Zombieland. I thought that was pretty neat. But anyway, in general, just a movie that it doesn't need to reinvent anything, but it does give us another fun round and another fun adventure in Zombieland. Real quick before I give you my top 3, remember to share your movies that you saw, your ranking down below in the comment section. Also, once this video is done, remember to check out my Instagram account. The link is down below in the description. That is the best place to get a hold of me if you want to send me a message or something like that. If you send me a question over direct message on Instagram, I almost certainly will respond to it, unless it's super complex or you're asking me to do something that I'm not able to do. In 3rd place is Parasite, another movie that I saw at Fantastic Fest and spoke about a month ago in that video about Fantastic Fest. I went into this movie not knowing anything about it other than it was called Parasite, and it's from the guy that did Snowpiercer, which I haven't seen. So I didn't know hardly anything about this movie going into it. And maybe that's the best way to go into it. I didn't know it was going to be a comedy. I didn't know anything about I hadn't seen a trailer. I'd seen the poster, heard the title, and knew Snowpiercer. And you go into it, and it starts off as kind of this dark comedy, a bit of a class comedy about this family that's under a hard time, trying to make ends meet, and doing a little bit of a questionable business to try and get some jobs with this one particular family. And then it just kind of turns on its head about halfway through the film and goes off in this totally other direction. And it switches genres while continuing with everything that was set up in the beginning of the film in ways that very interesting. It has a lot of things to say about society, classes, and all sorts of stuff, all packaged in a movie that has a high entertainment value because it can be so funny inside of it. It can, pulls at your heartstrings at other times. So a movie that does all kinds of stuff right. Our runner-up is going to be Dolomite Is My Name, another one that I saw at Fantastic Fest. And what was so interesting about this film is it was a secret screening. They didn't announce that they were going to play it. They do a couple secret screenings at Fantastic Fest. The other one that they did was the Lighthouse. And so I went into it thinking maybe it'll be the Joker, maybe it'll be Dr. Sleep, maybe it'll be Zombieland. I had these ideas of what it was going to be. Hadn't seen a trailer for Dolomite. They announced Dolomite is my name is the secret screening. I was like, oh crap. Like, wait, what are they about to show me? And then I really enjoyed the film. Obviously, it's number 2 on this one. I don't remember if it was my first or second favorite movie of Fantastic Fest, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. If you don't know what it is, essentially, it's like The Disaster Artist. Very much so like The Disaster Artist, except for a blaxploitation film from the 1970s. And it touches on even similar themes about friendship and kind of passion to pursue what you love and things like that, while it being very different at the same time, having a totally different sense of humor, telling the story of a guy that had tried tons of things and failed at them. And so finally, as he's like 50 years old, comes up with this idea for a stand-up routine, has success with it, and he tries to see how far he can take that and try to make a movie, and he doesn't really know how to make a movie and all the hijinks that ensue in the process. And I just found it to be funny, delightful, and hit all the right notes that it was supposed to. This is maybe the best Eddie Murphy has ever been because he's funny and he's this sweet character inside of it. Even though the Dolomite person that he plays is crass and vulgar, the actual guy isn't like that, and so it makes him very interesting and endearing. Wesley Snipes is another standout. Almost everyone in this movie is a standout, but it's funny, it's emotional, and it's an uplifting film about chasing your dreams, and it does so in a way that's like about a really bad movie that came out in the 70s, but a very bad movie that's been so enjoyable for a ton of different people for a variety of different reasons. Once again, very much like The Disaster Artist, another movie that I absolutely loved, and this is a great film to go side by side with that one. But coming in first place is The Joker, a movie that when they first announced it, I was as skeptical as anybody. I was on my videos, I was on Twitter being like, what is this? Like, I don't understand what this is. The director of The Hangover is doing a Joker standalone movie that's kind of being produced by Martin Scorsese. What is this? And everything they announced was even weirder. Like, Joaquin Phoenix, why does he want to do this? And then they dropped the trailer and went, oh, I see what you're going for here. And then watched the movie, and I loved it. I loved what they were going for with it, of making a movie where you're really rooting for Arthur inside of it, while at the same time knowing he's heading towards the Joker. And so even as kind of the brutality happens with the Joker and the violence occurs, you're not fully even rooting for it because you know that means we're losing Arthur and Arthur's turning into a monster. I thought that was very cool the way they did that the story of becoming, in him overcoming his shyness and all of his social anxiety to become the Joker. I love stories of becoming, but this story of becoming is a tragedy. It's horrifying as you're watching it unfold. It's such an interesting turn on the genre, as well as where comic book movies typically are big blockbuster spectacles. This one isn't. This is a psychological film. It's a thriller. It's a character study, and it's tragedy, all while delivering other things that you do want from comic book movies. So for me, it worked. It hit the right notes. I enjoyed what they were going for. It's artistically done. Joaquin Phoenix was fantastic. And so in a month that had a bunch of mediocre stuff and then had some great stuff as well, the one that came out on top for me was The Joker. Be sure to tell me what you thought down below in the comments section. If you want more content from me, you can check out that video right over there. I don't even know where it's going to take you. Let me know down below in the comment sections. Also, check out my Instagram account, link down below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.